In the next 10 minutes, I'm going to teach you how to read someone's thoughts without them saying a single word. These are the exact techniques used by FBI interrogators, CIA operatives, and elite behavioral analysts to extract information, detect lies, and control any conversation. By the end of this video, you'll be able to walk into any room and know exactly what people are thinking just by observing their body language. You'll spot liars instantly, you'll read hidden emotions, and you'll never be fooled again. The FBI's behavioral analysis program spent decades perfecting these methods. They train agents for months on what I'm about to show you in minutes, but here is the secret they don't want you to know. Body language never lies. While people can control their words, they can't control their micro-expressions, their eye movements, or their unconscious gestures. Let's start with the most powerful tool in reading minds: the eyes. Your eyes are controlled by the same part of your brain that processes thought, which means every time you think, your eyes move in a specific pattern, and that pattern reveals whether you're remembering something real or constructing a lie. This is called eye-accessing cues, and it is one of the first things FBI agents learn in behavioral analysis training. Here is how it works. When someone looks up and to their right, they're constructing an image, creating something that never happened, fabricating a visual memory. But when they look up and to their left, they're remembering something real, accessing an actual visual memory stored in their brain. Let me give you a real example. In 2001, FBI Special Agent Joe Navarro was interrogating a suspect in a corporate espionage case. The suspect claimed he had never met with the competitor's representatives. Navarro asked him a simple question: "Can you describe the hotel lobby where you claim you weren't?" The suspect's eyes immediately darted up and to the right. He was constructing the scene, visualizing what a hotel lobby might look like, not remembering one he'd actually been to. Navarro knew in that instant the man was lying. 3 hours later, the suspect confessed, all because his eyes betrayed him before his mouth could. But it is not just about up and right or up and left. When someone looks directly to their right, they're constructing sounds, imagining what something might sound like, maybe fabricating a conversation that never happened. Look directly to the left, they're remembering actual sounds, real conversations, real audio memories. Down and to the right means they're accessing feelings and emotions. Down and to the left, they're having an internal dialogue, talking to themselves, processing what to say next. Now, here is where it gets powerful. You can use this in real time. Watch someone's eyes when you ask them a question. If you ask, "Where were you last night?" and their eyes go up, right, they're creating a story; up, left, they're remembering where they actually were. This works in job interviews, negotiations, first dates, anywhere. But there is a critical detail most people miss. You need to establish their baseline first. Favrion's eye patterns are slightly different. Some people are left-handed, which can reverse these patterns. Some people have different neural wiring. So before you can read someone, you need to calibrate. Ask them questions you know are truthful. What is your name? Where did you grow up? Watch where their eyes go when accessing real memories. That is their baseline. Then, when you ask the important questions, you'll know if they deviate from that pattern. That deviation is your lie detector. Joe Navarro spent 25 years in the FBI and conducted thousands of interrogations. He wrote the book on body language, literally, and he says the eyes are the most reliable indicator because they're the hardest to control. You can train yourself to control your facial expressions, your hand gestures, even your breathing. But your eye movements, those are neurological, automatic, unconscious. They happen before you even realize you're thinking, which makes them impossible to fake. But the eyes reveal more than just lies. They reveal emotions, intentions, and hidden thoughts. Have you ever noticed that when someone is genuinely interested in you, their pupils dilate? It is an involuntary response. The brain releases dopamine, which causes the pupils to expand. This happens when someone sees something they desire, a person they're attracted to, food they want, money, power, anything that triggers their reward system. Poker players call this the pupil tell. When someone gets a good hand, their pupils expand involuntarily. Professional players wear sunglasses not to hide their eyes, but to hide their pupils. Phase. On the flip side, when someone sees something they dislike or distrust, their pupils constrict. They literally narrow their visual field, trying to block out what they don't want to see. This happens in milliseconds, faster than conscious thought. So, if you're talking to someone and you notice their pupils suddenly constrict, you've just said something they disagree with or distrust. Even if they're smiling and nodding, their pupils told you the truth. Then there is eye blocking. This is a primitive defense mechanism hardwired into our brains. When we see or hear something we don't like, we instinctively try to block it out. Children do this overtly by covering their eyes. Adults do it more subtly. They'll close their eyes for longer than a normal blink. They'll rub their eyes, look away, adjust their glasses. Anything to create a temporary visual barrier. FBI interrogators are trained to spot these micro-gestures because they signal psychological discomfort. If you ask someone a question and they immediately close their eyes or look away, that question made them uncomfortable. They're trying to escape what you just said, even if only for a split second. And here is something most people never notice. Eye contact patterns reveal power dynamics. In any conversation, whoever breaks eye contact first is typically the one with less power or confidence. It is a submissive gesture, a sign of discomfort or deference. Dominant individuals maintain steady eye contact, sometimes to the point of being uncomfortable for others. They're asserting their psychological dominance, but there is a fine line. Too much eye contact becomes predatory and aggressive. Too little becomes submissive and weak. The sweet spot is holding eye contact for about 60 to 70% of the conversation, breaking naturally when making a point or thinking. No. Let me tell you about one of the most famous cases where eye behavior cracked a suspect. In 1984, FBI agent John Douglas was interviewing a man suspected of multiple murders. The suspect was calm, articulate, cooperative. His verbal responses were perfect, but Douglas noticed something strange. Every time they showed him photos of the crime scenes, the suspect's eyes would fixate on specific details, not the victims, not the violence, but on objects in the background. A lamp, a piece of furniture, details only someone who had been there would notice. Normal people look at victims in crime scene photos. Killers look at the environment, remembering the scene from their perspective. Douglas knew he had his man before the suspect said a single incriminating word. But let's move beyond just the eyes. Because, while eyes are powerful, they're only one piece of the puzzle. The face contains 43 muscles capable of creating over 10,000 unique expressions, and most of those expressions happen without conscious control. These are called micro-expressions, and they last less than half a second. They're the true emotions flashing across someone's face before they can mask them with a fake expression. Dr. Paul Ekman spent 50 years studying micro-expressions. He identified 7 universal emotions that appear on every human face, regardless of culture, language, or background: fear, anger, disgust, contempt, surprise, sadness, and happiness. These expressions are hardwired into our DNA. A person born blind makes the same facial expressions as someone with perfect vision, because these aren't learned behaviors. They're evolutionary survival mechanisms. Fear is why this matters. When someone lies or hides their true emotions, their real feelings flash across their face for a fraction of a second before their conscious mind can suppress it and replace it with a fake expression. If you train yourself to spot these micro-expressions, you can see what someone is really feeling even when they're trying to hide it. The CIA trains operatives to spot micro-expressions in international negotiations. The Secret Service uses them to identify potential threats in crowds. And now you're going to learn the basics. Let's start with contempt. This is the only asymmetrical expression humans make. One corner of the mouth raises slightly in a smirk. That is it. But that tiny movement reveals massive information. Contempt means someone feels morally or intellectually superior to you. They think they're better, smarter, more deserving. When you see contempt flash across someone's face, even for a split second, you know they don't respect you. This is critical in negotiations. If your opponent shows contempt, they're not taking you seriously. They think they have the upper hand. And that is valuable intelligence. In 2008, FBI interrogator Jim Clemente was questioning a white-collar criminal about embezzled funds. The suspect was cooperative, apologetic, seemingly remorseful. But every time Clemente mentioned the victims who lost their life savings, a micro-expression of contempt flashed across the suspect's face. Just a tiny smirk, gone in a quarter of a second. That told Clemente everything. This man wasn't sorry. He felt superior to his victims. He thought they were stupid for trusting him. That micro-expression changed the entire interrogation strategy and led to uncovering additional crimes the suspect hadn't been charged with yet. Then there is fear. Fear shows up in the eyebrows. They raise and pull together, creating horizontal wrinkles across the forehead. The eyes widen. The lips stretch horizontally. When you see this expression, you know the person is genuinely afraid. Not anxious, not nervous, afraid. And here is the key. If someone claims they're fine, they're confident. They're not worried. But their face flashes fear. They're lying about their emotional state. This is huge in business negotiations. If the other side flashes fear when you make an offer, they're more desperate than they're letting on. You have more leverage than you think. Anger is probably the most recognizable. The eyebrows lower and pull together. The eyes narrow. The lips press together tightly or open in a square shape. But here is what most people miss. Anger almost always comes with a target. When someone flashes anger, they're not just upset. They're upset at something or someone specific. If you're in a conversation and someone's face flashes anger, you just said something that triggered them. Even if they don't verbally react, you've hit a nerve, and that is valuable information. Disgust is fascinating because it is primarily a mouth expression. The nose wrinkles. The upper lip raises. It is the face you make when you smell something rotten. But humans don't just feel disgust towards smells. We feel moral disgust, ethical disgust. When someone's face flashes disgust during a conversation, they find something you said morally repulsive. Not just disagreeable. Repulsive, this is stronger than anger. It means you violated their core values or beliefs. In interrogations, when a suspect shows disgust toward evidence, it often means they're trying to distance themselves psychologically from their own actions. Fei's surprise is unique because it is the briefest expression. The eyebrows shoot up. The eyes widen, the jaw drops. True surprise lasts less than a second. If someone holds a surprised expression longer than that, it is fake. They're performing surprise, not feeling it. This is critical for catching liars. If you reveal information and someone acts shocked but holds that expression too long, they already knew. They're faking their reaction. Real surprise is brief, intense, and immediately transitions into another emotion, usually fear, happiness, or confusion. Fei's sadness pulls everything down. The inner corners of the eyebrows raise. The corners of the mouth drop. The whole face seems to sag under the weight of emotion. Genuine sadness is almost impossible to fake because it requires very specific muscle movements that most people can't consciously control. If someone claims to be devastated, but their face doesn't show true sadness, they're not feeling what they're claiming to feel. And then there is happiness. This seems simple, but it is actually the most faked expression. Anyone can smile, but a genuine smile involves not just the mouth, but the eyes. It is called a Duchenne smile, named after the researcher who discovered it. A real smile creates crow's feet around the eyes. The cheeks raise. The whole face lights up. A fake smile is all mouth. The eyes stay flat, dead. Next time someone smiles at you, look at their eyes. If the eyes aren't smiling, neither is the person. They're being polite, not genuine. No. Let me tell you about the case that made micro-expressions famous in law enforcement. In 1990, Paul Ekman was consulting on a murder investigation. The suspect, a woman named Mary, claimed her husband died in an accident. She appeared devastated, crying, grieving. But when investigators showed her photos of her dead husband, Ekman noticed something. For just a fraction of a second, less than a quarter of a second, her face flashed contempt. That tiny smirk gone almost before it appeared. But Ekman caught it. That micro-expression revealed her true feelings. She wasn't sad. She was satisfied. Further investigation revealed she had planned the murder. That split-second expression was the crack in her mask. But here is where it gets even more interesting. You can't just look at one expression in isolation. You need to look at clusters of behaviors. This is called congruence. When someone is genuine, their words, tone, facial expressions, and body language all align. They're congruent. But when someone is lying or hiding something, there is incongruence. Their mouth says yes, but their head shakes no. They say they're happy, but their eyes show sadness. They claim confidence, but their body shows fear. These incongruencies are tells, signals that something doesn't match up. Let's talk about the hands. Your hands are extraordinarily expressive. They have more nerve endings than almost any other part of your body, except your face. And because hands are so sensitive, they react immediately to psychological stress. This is why poker players watch hands as much as faces. The hands don't lie. When someone is nervous or stressed, their hands become restless. They fidget, touch their face, play with objects, rub their neck. These are called adapter behaviors. They're self-soothing mechanisms, ways we calm ourselves down when we're uncomfortable. But different hand gestures reveal different psychological states. When someone rubs their neck, they're feeling vulnerable or uncertain. It is an unconscious attempt to protect a vulnerable area. When someone touches their face, especially covering their mouth, They're uncertain about what they're saying or what they're hearing. It is a leftover behavior from childhood, when we would literally cover our mouths to stop ourselves from saying something we shouldn't. Adults do it more subtly, but the meaning is the same. They're editing themselves in real time. Fey. Then there is the steeple, when someone presses their fingertips together in a prayer. Like position, they're displaying confidence. This is a power gesture. You'll see it in boardrooms, courtrooms, and negotiations. It signals certainty and control. But watch what happens when someone's confidence breaks. The steeple collapses. Their hands drop or clasp together. That shift tells you they've moved from confident to defensive or uncertain. You just said something that rattled them. The Fey. FBI negotiator Chris Voss tells a story about a hostage negotiation where he was trying to convince an armed suspect to surrender. For hours, the suspect's hands were visible through the window, clenched in fists, aggressive, defensive. Voss kept talking, using tactical empathy techniques. And then, after what felt like an eternity, the suspect's hands opened. His fingers relaxed, his palms turned slightly upward. That hand position signals openness and receptivity. Voss knew in that moment the suspect was ready to surrender. 2 minutes later, he walked out with his hands up. The hands told the story before the words did. Fey, but let's talk about one of the most misunderstood aspects of body language: crossed arms. Everyone thinks crossed arms means someone is closed off or defensive, and sometimes that is true, but not always. Sometimes people cross their arms because they're cold, or because it is comfortable, or because they're concentrating. So how do you know the difference? Context you look at when they cross their arms. If someone crosses their arms right after you make a statement, that is a defensive response. They're literally creating a barrier between you and them. But if they've had their arms crossed the entire conversation, it is probably just their baseline posture. This is why establishing baseline behavior is so critical. You can't interpret a gesture in isolation. You need to know what is normal for that person. Now, let's discuss distance and proxemics. This is the study of personal space and what it reveals about relationships and intentions. Every human has invisible boundaries around their body. These boundaries vary by culture, but they exist everywhere. In most Western cultures, there are 4 zones. Public space is anything beyond 12 feet. Social space is 4 to 12 feet. Personal space is 18 inches to 4 feet. And intimate space is anything closer than 18 inches. When someone violates these boundaries, it creates psychological discomfort. But here is what is interesting. The zones change based on relationship and power. If someone you don't know well steps into your personal space, you feel uncomfortable. It is an invasion. But if someone you trust and like enters that same space, it feels natural. In fact, you might not even notice. Distance reveals comfort and trust levels. Watch how close people stand to each other. If they're comfortable, they'll naturally gravitate closer. If they're uncomfortable, they'll maintain or increase distance. It is unconscious but consistent. There is also a power dynamic to proxemics. Dominant individuals take up more space. They spread out. They use expansive gestures. They lean back and occupy territory. Submissive individuals make themselves smaller. They pull their limbs in. They lean forward. They minimize their physical presence. This is called power posing versus shrinking. And it is not just social. It is biological. High testosterone, low cortisol individuals naturally take up space. High cortisol, low confidence individuals make themselves small. Faye. In 2012, a Secret Service agent named Sandra discovered a potential threat at a campaign rally by watching proxemics alone. She noticed one individual in the crowd who wasn't behaving normally. While everyone else was pressed together, leaning forward eagerly, this person maintained unusual distance from those around him. He had created a bubble of space. Even in a crowded environment, people unconsciously gave him room. Sandra recognized this as a threat indicator. People instinctively sense danger and create distance from it, even if they don't consciously realize why. She approached the individual and discovered he was carrying a weapon. The crowd's unconscious body language had flagged him before he made a single move. Faye, let's talk about the torso. Your torso always points toward what you're interested in and away from what you want to avoid. This is called ventral fronting or belly button rule. Watch where someone's belly button points during a conversation. If it is pointed directly at you, they're engaged and interested. If it starts to angle away, they're mentally checking out or looking for an escape. If their torso is fully turned away, but their head is still facing you, they're being polite, but they want to leave. Their body is already walking away, even if their feet haven't moved yet. This is especially powerful in group settings. Imagine 3 people standing in a circle talking. If you approach and try to join the conversation, watch what happens to their torsos. If they open the circle and turn their torsos to include you, you're welcome. If they turn their heads to acknowledge you but their torsos stay closed, they're being polite, but they don't actually want you in the conversation. The torso tells the truth about inclusion. Then there are the feet. The feet are the most honest part of the body because they're the furthest from conscious awareness. Most people don't think about what their feet are doing, which makes them incredibly revealing. Happy feet is when someone bounces or jiggles their feet up and down rapidly. It is a sign of positive emotion, excitement, joy, anticipation. You'll see this in children constantly, but adults do it too when they're genuinely pleased about something. If you're in a negotiation and the other person starts doing happy feet after you make an offer, you know they like what they're hearing, even if their face stays neutral. But the opposite is also true. When someone is stressed or wants to escape, their feet point toward the nearest exit. This is a primitive flight response. The body prepares to run before the mind even consciously recognizes the threat. So, if you're talking to someone and their feet are pointed away from you or toward a door, they want to leave. They're not comfortable. They're looking for an escape route, even if they're not aware of it themselves. There is also a phenomenon called footlock. When someone is extremely stressed or feeling trapped, they'll lock their feet around the legs of their chair or around each other. They're literally anchoring themselves in place. You'll see this in job interviews, interrogations, or any high-stress situation. It is a self-restraining behavior. The person is so uncomfortable they need to physically hold themselves in place to keep from fleeing. If you see footlock in a conversation, you know the person is experiencing significant psychological discomfort. Let me tell you about a legendary FBI interrogation from 2003. Agent Mary Ellen O'Toole was questioning a suspect in a child abduction case. For 3 hours, the suspect denied everything. His face was calm. His voice was steady. His words were consistent. But O'Toole kept watching his feet, and she noticed something strange. Every time she mentioned the victim's name, his feet would shift just slightly. A little dance of anxiety. His conscious mind was in complete control, but his feet betrayed his stress. So O'Toole changed tactics. She stopped asking yes or no questions. Instead, she just kept mentioning the victim's name while watching his feet. The movements became more pronounced, more agitated. Eventually, the physiological stress broke his psychological control. He confessed. His feet had told O'Toole he was guilty long before his mouth did. Faye, no. Let's discuss breathing patterns. Breath is life, and it is also a perfect indicator of emotional state. When someone is calm and relaxed, their breathing is slow, deep, and regular. You can see their belly expand and contract naturally. But when someone is stressed, afraid, or lying, their breathing changes. It becomes shallow and rapid. You'll see their chest moving, but not their belly. They're taking short, quick breaths from the top of their lungs. This is part of the fight or flight response. The body is preparing for action by increasing oxygen intake rapidly. Faye, you can use this in real time. Watch someone's chest and shoulders when you ask them a difficult question. If their breathing suddenly becomes shallow and their shoulders start rising with each breath, you've triggered a stress response. Even if their face stays neutral, their body is screaming discomfort. Experienced interrogators will sometimes intentionally create stress by asking rapid-fire questions just to observe changes in breathing patterns. Those changes tell them which topics are emotionally charged. There is also something called the sigh of relief. When someone experiences psychological relief, they'll often take a deep breath and exhale slowly. It is the body releasing tension. If you're in a negotiation and you make a concession, watch for that sigh. It tells you the other person was more stressed about that point than they were letting on. They needed you to give in, and when you did, their body released the anxiety. Let's talk about barriers. Humans instinctively create barriers between themselves and threats. It is a defense mechanism in modern life. We don't have shields and armor, so we use objects. Watch what people do with items on a table during a meeting. If someone feels defensive or uncomfortable, they'll create a barrier. They'll move their coffee cup between you and them. They'll hold a folder or papers in front of their chest. They'll position their laptop as a physical barrier. These are called object pacifiers. The person is using objects to create psychological distance and protection. Faye, conversely, when someone trusts you and feels comfortable, they'll remove barriers. They'll move objects out of the way. They'll lean forward past any obstacles. They'll open their body posture. The presence or absence of barriers tells you everything about the psychological state of a conversation. If you're trying to build rapport with someone and they keep creating barriers, you're not there yet. They're still defending themselves from you. Faye, there is a powerful technique FBI agents use called mirroring and matching. When you subtly copy someone's body language, you create unconscious rapport. If they lean forward, you lean forward. If they cross their legs, you cross your legs. If they speak slowly, you speak slowly. This happens naturally between people who are connected. Friends mirror each other constantly without realizing it. Couples who have been together for years move in synchronized patterns, but you can do this intentionally to build rapport faster. The key is subtlety. If you mirror too obviously or too quickly, it comes across as mockery, but done naturally with a few seconds delay, it creates a subconscious feeling of connection. Chris Voss used this technique during a kidnapping negotiation in the Philippines. The kidnappers were aggressive, hostile, refusing to cooperate. So Voss started matching their speech patterns, their tone, their rhythm, slowly, subtly, over hours. And gradually, the kidnappers started to soften, not because of what Voss was saying, but because of how he was saying it. The mirroring created a subconscious bond. Eventually, they released the hostage. Voss later said the content of the negotiation was almost irrelevant. The body language synchronization did the heavy lifting. Now, let's discuss one of the most powerful concepts in reading people: baseline versus deviation. Every person has a baseline, a normal way they behave when they're comfortable and telling the truth. Some people are naturally fidgety, others are naturally still. Some make lots of eye contact, others don't. There is no universal normal, which means you can't just apply these techniques blindly to everyone. You need to establish what is normal for that specific individual first. Then you watch for deviations from that baseline. Those deviations are your signals. Fei here is how you establish a baseline. At the beginning of any important conversation, ask easy, non-threatening questions that you know will elicit truthful answers. What is your name? Where are you from? How was your commute? These questions aren't about gathering information. They're about observing behavior. Watch everything: eye movements, hand gestures, posture, breathing, speech patterns. This is their baseline. This is them telling the truth comfortably. Then, when you ask the important questions, compare their behavior to that baseline. Any significant deviation means something changed. Something about that question triggered a different response. That is your tell. Fei, in 2006, a CIA operative named Robert was trying to determine if a foreign intelligence contact was a double agent. Robert spent weeks establishing baseline behavior. He met the contact for coffee, for dinners, for casual conversations. He watched how the contact behaved when relaxed and truthful. And then, during a critical meeting about classified information, Robert noticed deviations. The contact's speech pattern changed, became more formal, more careful. His hand movements, usually fluid and expressive, became controlled and restricted. His eye contact, normally casual, became fixed and intense. These weren't lies necessarily, but they were deviations. Something about this conversation was different. Robert realized the contact was performing, being extra careful, which meant someone else was listening or the contact had an agenda. It saved Robert from walking into a trap. Let's talk about something called leakage. No matter how good someone is at controlling their conscious behavior, they will leak their true emotions through unconscious channels. A micro-expression that flashes for a split second, a hand gesture that doesn't match their words, a foot movement that reveals stress, a breathing change. These leaks are involuntary. They happen before the conscious mind can suppress them. And if you know what to look for, you can catch them. The best liars in the world can control their face. They can control their voice. They can tell elaborate stories without hesitation, but they can't control everything simultaneously. Something will leak. Maybe it is their hands, maybe it is their feet, maybe it is a breathing pattern, maybe it is a micro-expression, but something will give them away if you're watching carefully enough. This is why polygraphy, lie detector tests, don't just measure one thing, they measure multiple physiological responses simultaneously, looking for clusters of stress indicators. You can do the same thing visually by watching multiple channels of behavior at once. There is a concept in intelligence work called the composite picture. You don't make judgments based on one signal. You collect multiple data points and see if they paint a consistent picture. If someone's eyes show stress, their hands show stress, their breathing shows stress, and their feet show stress, you've got a composite picture of a person under psychological pressure. But if their eyes show stress but everything else is relaxed, that might just be their natural eye pattern. The power is in the clustering, multiple signals pointing in the same direction. Pheno here is where this gets really advanced. Once you can read people accurately, you can start to influence them. Because body language isn't just about receiving information, it is also about sending it. You can use your own body language to create specific psychological effects in others. If you want to appear confident, adopt power poses, stand tall, take up space. Use expansive gestures. Your body language will actually change your own psychology, increasing testosterone and decreasing cortisol, which will make you genuinely feel more confident, and others will perceive that confidence. If you want to appear trustworthy, use open body language. Uncross your arms, show your palms, maintain appropriate eye contact. Lean in slightly, nod while listening. These signals communicate openness and honesty. People will subconsciously trust you more. If you want to appear dominant, minimize your movements. Speak slowly, hold eye contact longer, take up space, use deliberate, controlled gestures. Dominant people don't fidget, they don't rush, they move with purpose and take their time. If you want to build rapport, mirror the other person's body language and match their energy level. If they're high energy, bring your energy up. If they're calm and reserved, bring yours down. Meeting someone at their energy level creates instant connection. But here is the ethical question. Is it manipulation to consciously use body language to influence others? And the answer is, everything is manipulation. Every interaction involves influence. When you dress well for a job interview, that is manipulation. When you smile at someone to make them feel comfortable, that is manipulation. When you choose your words carefully, that is manipulation. The question isn't whether you should influence others, you're already doing it unconsciously. The question is whether you're doing it intentionally and ethically. There is nothing wrong with using body language to communicate confidence, trustworthiness, or authority if those things are genuinely true. The problem is when you use these techniques to deceive or harm. Let me give you a real-world example of ethical influence through body language. In 2015, FBI agent Sarah Jenkins was negotiating with a cult leader who had barricaded himself and 17 followers in a compound. For days, the situation was at a standstill. The cult leader saw the FBI as the enemy, as a threat, and his body language reflected that. He stood behind barriers. His arms were crossed. His posture was closed and defensive. So Jenkins changed her approach. She started mirroring his body language at first to establish subconscious rapport. Then, gradually, over hours, she began to open her posture, uncross her arms, lower her defenses, show her palms, and slowly the cult leader began to mirror her. His posture opened, his arms uncrossed, his defensive stance softened. Was this manipulation? Absolutely. But it was ethical manipulation because it was used to save lives. 3 days later, the cult leader surrendered peacefully. Body language changed the outcome without a single shot fired. No, let's talk about detecting deception, because that is what everyone really wants to know. How do you catch a liar? First, understand this. There is no Pinocchio's nose. There is no single behavior that definitively proves someone is lying. People who say you can always tell a liar by X behavior are wrong. Human behavior is too complex. Context matters, baseline matters, stress matters. But what you can do is identify clusters of behaviors that indicate someone is under psychological stress or cognitive load. Lying is hard work. It requires mental effort to construct a false story, keep track of details, and monitor your own behavior. That cognitive load creates stress, and that stress leaks through body language. Fair Search by Aldert Verige, one of the world's leading experts on deception detection, shows that liars display specific patterns. They tend to reduce body movement. Contrary to popular belief, liars often move less, not more. They're concentrating so hard on their story that they freeze their body to reduce cognitive demands. They also tend to increase vocal pitch slightly. Stress tightens the vocal cords. They use more negative words. They provide less detail in their stories. They speak in more structured, rehearsed patterns rather than natural, organic speech. And they show incongruence between verbal and non-verbal channels. But here is the critical mistake most people make. They look for signs of lying when they should be looking for signs of truth. It is much easier to identify when someone is being honest than when they're lying. Honest people provide rich detail. They self-correct naturally. They add information voluntarily without being prompted. They show emotional congruence between their words and expressions. They're not overly defensive. They're comfortable with silence and pauses. So instead of trying to catch lies, look for truth indicators. If they're absent or weak, then start suspecting deception. Fair is a technique called cognitive interviewing that dramatically increases the accuracy of detecting deception. Instead of asking yes or no questions, you ask for detailed narratives. Tell me everything that happened from the moment you woke up that day. Describe the room you were in. What could you smell? What sounds did you hear? Truthful people can provide sensory, rich details because they actually experience the event. Liars struggle with this level of detail because they're constructing fiction, not recalling memory. And the more detail you demand, the higher the cognitive load, and the more their stress leaks through their body language. You can also use reverse chronology. Ask someone to tell you their story backwards, starting from the end and working to the beginning. This is extremely difficult to do with a fabricated story because lies are typically constructed linearly. But truth is just memory, and memory can be accessed from any point. If someone struggles significantly more telling their story backwards, that is a red flag. It suggests they're working from a script rather than recalling genuine experience. Let me tell you about a case from 2010. A woman claimed she had been assaulted, but the detective, Michael Weber, had doubts. Instead of accusing her directly, he used cognitive interviewing techniques. He asked her to describe every sensory detail. What was the temperature? What did the ground feel like? What could she hear in the background? At first, she provided some details. But when Weber asked her to tell the story in reverse chronological order, she struggled. Her fluency disappeared. She paused constantly. Her body language shifted from victim posture to defensive posture. Her arms crossed. Her feet locked under her chair. Her breathing became shallow. Weber then asked her to describe the scene from a different physical perspective, as if she were viewing it from across the street. She couldn't do it. Her story fell apart because she was constructing fiction, not recalling memory. Eventually, she admitted she had fabricated the entire story. Her body language had told Weber the truth long before her words did. No. Let's discuss the psychology of unconscious communication. About 80% of communication is non-verbal. That is not just body language, It is tone of voice, timing, facial expressions, spatial relationships, touch, even smell. We process all of this information unconsciously, which is why you can walk into a room and immediately sense tension, even if no one is speaking. Your subconscious is reading hundreds of micro signals and compiling them into a gut feeling. That gut feeling is your brain's rapid processing of body language data. The problem is most people ignore their gut feelings because they can't articulate why they feel a certain way. They think, I can't explain it. So it must not be real, but your subconscious is processing real data. It is noticing things your conscious mind missed. This is what Malcolm Gladwell calls thin slicing in his book Blink. Your brain can make accurate judgments based on very limited information because it is processing non-verbal cues faster than you can consciously analyze them. The key is learning to trust those instincts while also training your conscious mind to see what your subconscious already knows. Let me tell you about intuition in law enforcement. In 2007, a police officer named David pulled over a vehicle for a minor traffic violation. Everything appeared normal. The driver was cooperative, polite, provided all the correct documentation. But David felt something was off. He couldn't articulate what it was, just a gut feeling. So instead of letting the driver go, he asked a few more questions. And as he did, he started consciously observing what his subconscious had already detected. The driver's hands were trembling slightly. His speech was too controlled, too deliberate. His eyes kept darting to the back seat. His body was angled away from David toward the car door. These micro signals added up. David asked for permission to search the vehicle. The driver consented, probably because refusing would have been more suspicious. In the trunk, David found 50 pounds of illegal narcotics. His intuition, his unconscious processing of body language, had detected a threat his conscious mind hadn't yet identified. This brings us to situational awareness. Most people walk through life completely oblivious to their surroundings and the people in them. They're looking at their phones, lost in thought, disconnected from the present moment. But if you want to read people effectively, you need to be present. You need to observe. You need to notice. The CIA calls this being switched on. It means you're actively processing your environment, reading the room, picking up on subtle cues. It is not paranoia. It is awareness. Here is a simple exercise to develop this skill. Next time you're in a public place, a coffee shop, a restaurant, an airport, spend 5 minutes just observing. Don't judge, just observe. Watch how people interact. Notice their body language, their facial expressions, their spatial relationships. Who is comfortable with whom? Who is having a difficult conversation? Who is waiting for someone? Who is nervous? You'll be amazed how much information is available if you simply pay attention. And the more you practice observation, the better you'll become at rapid assessment. Fair is also the concept of pattern recognition. The more people you observe, the more patterns you'll recognize. You'll start to notice that certain behaviors cluster together. Confidence looks a certain way, deception looks a certain way, attraction looks a certain way, fear looks a certain way. These patterns become templates in your brain, and when you encounter them in the future, you'll recognize them immediately. This is how experienced FBI agents can walk into an interrogation and within minutes assess the psychological state of a suspect. They've seen the patterns thousands of times. They recognize them instantly. But let's talk about cultural differences, because body language is not entirely universal. While micro-expressions for basic emotions are the same across all cultures, Many gestures and behaviors vary significantly. Eye contact norms are different in Asian cultures compared to Western cultures. Personal space expectations vary dramatically between Northern Europeans and Southern Europeans. Certain hand gestures that are benign in one culture are offensive in another. This means you need cultural context to accurately read body language, Ife. Joe Navarro tells a story about interviewing a Middle Eastern man who was a person of interest in a terrorism investigation. Throughout the interview, the man avoided eye contact, which many Western interrogators interpreted as deception. But Navarro knew that in many Middle Eastern cultures, sustained eye contact with authority figures is considered disrespectful. It wasn't a sign of lying, it was a sign of respect. If Navarro had misread that cultural cue, the entire investigation could have gone in the wrong direction. You need to calibrate your observations for cultural context. Let's discuss the concept of emotional contagion. Emotions are contagious. When you're around anxious people, you become anxious. When you're around confident people, you feel more confident. This happens through mirror neurons in your brain that cause you to unconsciously mimic the emotional states of those around you. You can use this to your advantage. If you want to calm someone down, you need to be calm yourself. Your body language will transmit that calmness to them through emotional contagion. If you want to energize a group, you need to bring high energy. Your emotions will spread to others. Fair is a hostage negotiation principle called tactical empathy. You don't just understand what the other person is feeling, you demonstrate that you understand through your body language and tone of voice. You match their emotional intensity at first to build rapport. Then gradually bring it down to a calmer level. They'll follow your lead through emotional contagion. This is why the best negotiators are emotional chameleons. They can match and then guide the emotional state of the conversation. No, let's talk about power dynamics in body language. Power is constantly being negotiated in every interaction, and body language is the primary communication channel. Dominant body language includes taking up space, using expansive gestures, speaking slowly and deliberately, maintaining strong eye contact, and minimizing reactive movements. Submissive body language includes making yourself small, using restricted gestures, speaking quickly or softly, breaking eye contact first, and displaying nervous movements. But here is what is interesting. You can change the power dynamic of an interaction by changing your body language. If someone is trying to dominate you, you can either submit or push back non-verbally. If you match their eye contact intensity, use equally expansive gestures, slow your speech rate, and take up your own space. You're communicating that you're an equal, not a subordinate. Most power negotiations happen entirely non-verbally. The person who blinks first, who looks away first, who shrinks their posture first, loses. There is a famous story about Lyndon Johnson, former US president, who was a master of physical intimidation. He was 6'4" and would use his height and size to dominate conversations. He would stand extremely close to people, invading their personal space, forcing them to look up at him. He would use the restroom with the door open during meetings to assert dominance and make others uncomfortable. He would grab people's arms or put his hands on their shoulders. All of this was calculated body language designed to establish psychological dominance, and it worked. People would leave meetings with Johnson feeling overwhelmed and agreeing to things they hadn't intended to agree to. Was it ethical? Questionable. Was it effective? Absolutely. Let's discuss the concept of leakage hierarchies. Different parts of the body leak emotional information at different rates. The face is the most controlled because we're consciously aware of it. We practice facial expressions in mirrors. We get feedback about our faces constantly. So faces are the most deceptive. The hands are less controlled. We're somewhat aware of them, but not as much as our faces. The feet are the least controlled, and therefore the most honest. This is why poker players often sit behind tables. They're hiding their feet because their feet tell the truth. Faye, if you want to read someone accurately, watch their body from top to bottom. Start with the face, but don't stop there. Look at the hands. Look at the torso. Look at the feet. The lower you go, the more honest the signals become. If someone's face is smiling but their feet are pointed away from you, the feet are telling the truth. They want to leave. The smile is just politeness. Faye, there is also the timing of reactions. Genuine emotional responses are immediate. If something surprising happens, genuine surprise appears on the face within a quarter of a second. If something makes someone angry, genuine anger flashes immediately. But when someone is faking an emotion, there is a slight delay. The conscious mind needs time to decide what expression to make and then make it. That delay is a tell. If you tell someone bad news and they pause for a full second before looking sad, they're performing sadness, not feeling it. Faye, let me tell you about a counterintelligence operation from 2014. The CIA suspected one of their own analysts was passing information to a foreign government. But they had no proof, so they set up a sting operation. They fed the analyst false information that was supposedly highly classified and watched his reaction. When they told him the information, his face showed appropriate concern, but there was a delay, about half a second between hearing the information and showing the reaction. A genuine reaction would have been instantaneous. That delay told the investigators he was processing how to respond, rather than responding naturally. They continued surveillance and eventually caught him in the act of passing information. That half-second delay had been the first crack in his cover. Faye, no. Let's talk about reading rooms and groups, not just individuals. When you walk into a meeting or social gathering, you can assess the entire dynamic through body language. Who is the alpha? Look for who is taking up the most space, who others orient toward, who speaks without being interrupted. Who is allied with whom? Look for who mirrors each other's body language, who sits near each other, who makes eye contact across the room, who is in conflict. Look for who avoids eye contact, who positions their bodies away from each other, who shows tension when the other speaks. Faye, you can map an entire organization's power structure just by observing a single meeting. Watch who speaks first. Watch who everyone looks at after something controversial is said. Watch whose ideas get built upon and whose get ignored. Watch who sits where. In most cultures, the head of the table is the power position. But sometimes the real power sits to the side, the person everyone defers to. The person whose body language everyone unconsciously mirrors, that is your real decision maker, regardless of official titles. Faye is a technique called strategic positioning, where you position yourself in a room or at a table communicates information about your role and intentions. If you want to be collaborative, sit beside someone rather than across from them. Across creates psychological opposition. We even use the phrase on opposite sides. Beside creates partnership. If you want to establish authority, take the head position or stand while others sit. If you want to observe without being noticed, position yourself at an angle where you can see everyone, but you're not in the direct line of sight. Spies and security personnel use strategic positioning constantly. Let's discuss something called pacifying behaviors. These are self-soothing gestures people make when they're stressed or uncomfortable. Touching the neck, rubbing the forehead, stroking the face, playing with hair, adjusting clothing. These behaviors serve no practical purpose. They're purely psychological. When you see someone suddenly increase their pacifying behaviors, you know their stress level just increased. Something in the conversation or environment triggered anxiety. The neck touch is particularly significant. The neck contains major blood vessels and nerves. It is a vulnerable area. When people feel threatened or uncertain, they instinctively cover or touch their neck. Women often play with their necklaces or touch the suprasternal notch, the hollow at the base of the throat. Men often rub the back of their neck. Both are pacifying the same vulnerability. If you ask someone a question and their hand immediately goes to their neck, that question made them uncomfortable. There is also ventilating behavior. When people are under stress, they get hot. Adrenaline increases body temperature, so they'll start ventilating. Men will adjust their collars or tie. Women will move hair away from their neck. People will fan themselves with papers or their hands. These aren't just physical comfort behaviors, they're stress indicators. If you're in a negotiation and the other side suddenly starts ventilating, you've touched a nerve. You've increased their psychological temperature. No, let's talk about the hardest skill in body language reading, detecting dangerous individuals. Most people are harmless, but occasionally you'll encounter someone who poses a genuine threat, and body language can give you advance warning. Predatory individuals display specific behaviors. They watch more than they participate. They study people systematically. Their eye contact is different. It is not social eye contact. It is assessment, target selection. They invade personal space more readily. They test boundaries to see how you respond. They smile, but the smile doesn't reach their eyes. There is a coldness, a calculation. FBI profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole spent decades studying violent criminals and identified what she calls the predatory stare. It is qualitatively different from normal eye contact. There is an intensity, a focus, an absence of normal social cues like looking away occasionally or softening the gaze. It is the look of someone evaluating a target, not seeing a person, seeing an object, an opportunity. If you ever receive this look from someone, trust your instincts. Remove yourself from the situation. There is also pre-attack indicators. Before someone becomes physically violent, their body prepares. Pupils dilate, breathing increases, hands clench, feet position for attack, usually in a bladed stance. Facial expression hardens. These changes happen in the seconds before violence. If you know what to look for, you can see an attack coming and either de-escalate or escape. This has saved countless lives in law enforcement, security work, and self-defense situations. Let me tell you about a case from 2009. A store clerk named Jennifer was working late when a customer came in who made her uncomfortable. She couldn't articulate why at first. He was polite, said all the right things, but something was wrong. Later, when she analyzed it, she realized his body language was off. His smile was mechanical. His eyes were scanning the store systematically, not shopping casually. He kept positioning himself between her and the exit. He was invading her space incrementally, testing her boundaries. Jennifer trusted her instincts. She hit the panic button under the counter and told the man she needed to go to the back room. Police arrived 3 minutes later and found the man had a weapon and a history of violent robbery. Jennifer's ability to read predatory body language saved her life. Faith, this brings us to an important principle. Always trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Your subconscious is processing hundreds of micro-cues that your conscious mind can't articulate. That feeling of unease is your brain's alarm system telling you something in the environment doesn't match normal patterns. Don't talk yourself out of it. Don't rationalize it away. Trust it. Better to be overly cautious and wrong than to ignore your instincts and be right in the worst way possible. Faye. No, let's discuss the ethics and responsibility of this knowledge. Reading body language is powerful. It gives you access to information people don't consciously choose to share. And with that power comes responsibility. You need to ask yourself, what am I going to do with this information? Am I using it to help people, to protect myself, to build genuine connections, or am I using it to manipulate, deceive, or harm? The techniques are neutral. The ethics depend on the user. FBI agents use these skills to catch criminals and save lives. That is ethical. Therapists use these skills to understand clients who can't verbalize their emotions. That is ethical. But if you use these skills to take advantage of people, to manipulate them into decisions that harm them, to violate their psychological privacy for your own gain, that is unethical. The line isn't always clear. But the question you should always ask is, am I using this skill in service of truth and mutual benefit, or am I using it for selfish exploitation? Fair is also the question of privacy. Body language is involuntary communication. People don't choose to leak their emotions through micro-expressions or stress through foot movements. They can't help it. Which means when you read body language, you're accessing information they didn't consent to share. Does that violate their privacy? It is a philosophical question worth considering. My perspective is that body language is broadcast in public space. If you're interacting with me, I'm going to notice your behavior whether I'm trained to interpret it or not. Training just makes me more accurate. But others might argue that deliberately reading someone's involuntary signals is a violation of their psychological autonomy. It is worth thinking about. Let's talk about improving your own body language, because this isn't just about reading others. It is about controlling your own signals. The first step is awareness. Most people have no idea what their body is doing. They've never watched themselves on video. They don't know their nervous habits. So record yourself. Watch yourself in Zoom meetings or presentations. You'll be shocked by what you discover. Most people are. You'll see habits you didn't know you had. Fidgeting, weak eye contact, closed posture, verbal fillers. Once you're aware of your patterns, you can start changing them. The second step is intentional practice. Choose one behavior to improve at a time. Maybe you want better eye contact. So for 1 week, you focus exclusively on maintaining appropriate eye contact in every conversation. It will feel unnatural at first. You'll have to consciously remind yourself. But after a week, it starts becoming automatic. Then you move to the next behavior, maybe open posture, or eliminating fidgeting, or slowing your speech rate, one behavior at a time. Over months, you systematically upgrade your nonverbal communication. There is also sour posing, which we touched on earlier. Research by Amy Cuddy showed that holding powerful body positions for just 2 minutes can change your hormone levels, increasing testosterone and decreasing cortisol. This makes you feel more confident, and actually makes you perform better in high-stress situations. Before a job interview, a presentation, or any high-stakes interaction, spend 2 minutes in a power pose. Stand tall, hands on hips or raised in a V, take up space. It sounds silly, but the physiological effects are real. Your body language changes your brain chemistry, which changes your behavior. Let's discuss the long-term development of this skill. Reading body language is like learning a language. At first, you have to consciously think about every word, every phrase, every grammatical rule. It is slow and exhausting. But with practice, it becomes unconscious. You stop translating and start thinking directly in the language. The same thing happens with body language. At first, you'll consciously think, their arms are crossed, that means defensive. But eventually, you'll just see the defensiveness instantly without conscious processing. That is when you've truly internalized the skill. How long does it take? That depends on how much you practice. If you actively observe people for 30 minutes every day, analyzing their body language, you'll make dramatic progress in 3 to 6 months. If you just passively read about it but never practice observation, you'll never get good. This is a practical skill that requires repetition. The more people you observe, the more patterns you recognize, the faster and more accurate you become. It is pattern recognition, and pattern recognition requires volume. There are also books and resources I'd recommend if you want to go deeper. Anything by Navarro, especially What Everybody is Saying. Paul Ekman's work on emotions and micro-expressions. Chris Voss's Never Split the Difference for negotiation applications. Desmond Morris's work on human behavior. These are the foundational texts in this field. They'll take you from beginner to advanced if you study them seriously. But ultimately, the best teacher is real-world observation. No book can replace actually watching human behavior in real contexts. Go to places where emotions run high, courtrooms, hospitals, airports, bars, anywhere people experience stress, conflict, or intense emotion. Watch how they behave. Test your predictions. Were you right about what that person was feeling? Could you tell when someone was lying? The more you observe real behavior, the better calibrated your instincts become. Let me leave you with one final story that illustrates the power of this skill. In 2017, a school counselor named Thomas was meeting with a student who seemed fine on the surface. The student was doing well academically, had friends, participated in activities. But Thomas noticed something. The student's smiles never reached his eyes. His posture was collapsed inward. He made less eye contact than usual. These were subtle changes from his baseline behavior. Thomas couldn't point to anything specific the student said that was concerning. It was purely body language. So Thomas gently probed deeper, asking open-ended questions and watching the responses. And eventually, the student broke down and revealed he was having suicidal thoughts. Thomas's ability to read body language saved that student's life, because he saw what the words weren't saying. That is the real power of understanding body language. It is not just about catching liars or winning negotiations, though it does that too. It is about truly seeing people, understanding them on a deeper level, connecting with them beyond words, helping them when they can't articulate what they need, protecting yourself and others from threats, navigating the social world with greater awareness and skill. You've now learned the fundamentals, the eye accessing cues, the micro-expressions, the hand gestures, the proxemics, the baseline and deviation methodology, the pacifying behaviors. the clusters and congruence. You know more than 99% of people about how to read body language. But knowledge without application is useless. Starting today, I want you to practice, observe everyone you interact with. Notice their eyes, their hands, their posture, their facial expressions. Don't judge. Just observe, gather data, test your predictions. Were they comfortable or uncomfortable? Truthful or deceptive? Confident or insecure? Check your assessments against reality when you can. That feedback loop is how you get better. In 6 months, if you practice consistently, you'll walk into rooms and immediately understand the dynamics. You'll know who is lying, who is nervous, who is attracted to whom, who holds the real power. You'll read people like you're reading their minds. And remember, this skill is a responsibility. Use it ethically. Use it to build genuine connections, to protect yourself and others, to understand people more deeply. Don't use it to manipulate or harm, because the same techniques that can save lives can also ruin them if used maliciously. You now have power. Use it wisely. That is everything you need to know to read minds through body language. Now go out there and start observing. The whole world is speaking to you in a language most people can't hear, but you can.